Hello and welcome to the MovieKing Podcast. My name is David Jurmann and I'll be your host. On today's episode, I'm going to discuss my top 10 favorite movies of 2024. Well, I guess it's better late than never, right? I mean, truthfully, I always like to release my best and worst of lists around the time of the Oscars, because that's when everything has been widely released from the year before, and it also gives me some extra time to watch some films I may have not gotten the time for, or wouldn't have known about otherwise. And because, spoiler alert, if I were to make my list back at the beginning of January when the year first released and when most people, make their lists, there would be two movies not on this list that should have been there, one of them literally being my number one of the whole year. So that's kind of why I make it later. I always just like to make sure I see everything that I can. And, it's just, I don't like the fact that I think internally I'd feel very sad if I made a list at the beginning of January. And then, a few months down, I saw a movie that really should have been on the list. And I was like, dang it, I didn't make it. Now for years, people are going to listen to this and then think like, oh, I guess you didn't see that movie. I didn't like it that much. But no, I did. So that's why I do that. So anyway, let's get this started with some honorable mentions. These are all movies I greatly enjoyed and deserve a shout out, but didn't make my actual top 10 list. And for the record, I have seen a whopping 141 movies from 2024, so I'm pulling from a wide, vast range of films, not just a list of 20 or 30, so we got a lot of movies here that I looked at and really judged and critiqued. So, with all that being said, here are my honorable mentions. Hitman, a funny, wild, and charming movie starring Glenn Powell. Twisters, another Glenn Powell movie that basically took the original Twisters that I wasn't so crazy about and gave it the Top Gun Maverick treatment, so it's one of the most entertaining thrill rides of the year. The Substance, probably the most wild and bizarre Best Picture nominee that I've ever seen, but in the best of ways. It's a really good movie. It's so disturbing and gross, but deeply burned in my memory. Demi Moore is also fantastic in it. She absolutely deserved that Academy Award nomination. It's a shame she didn't win because she's, up there in age, and I don't know if she'll ever get the opportunity again, but she was awesome. Nosferatu. Robert Eggers made yet another awesome period piece that takes a classic story to new heights with awesome performances from Lily Rose Depp and Bill Skarsgård. It's terrifying, it's creepy, it's haunting. Everything I wanted out of it, it's great. The Fall Guy. My favorite chemistry between actors in a long time, Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt are electric together. And this action rom-com is so much fun. It's really funny and entertaining. Definitely one of the most entertaining movies of the year in my book. Inside Out 2. Even if not quite as good as the original, this sequel is deeply emotional and takes these characters that we love on another satisfying and entertaining journey through life, and also gives another story for Riley that I think is very intriguing and a bit different from the original while still kind of following the same formula. Strange Darling. One of the biggest pleasant surprises of the year. It's a conventional story told unconventionally, and Willa Fitzgerald is awesome. She really sells this movie, and I think it's one of those movies that just sticks in my memory for a while. Heretic. It's Hugh Grant monologuing about religion, Jar Jar Binks, and board games. What's not to love? Wicked. It's only part one, but still gets all the right feels across and is carried by Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande, who have great chemistry together, are both great actors, and really sell this version of the story. I think I like this movie even better than the Broadway musical. And lastly, Superman, the Christopher Reeve story. A powerful, inspirational, and gut-wrenching documentary on a real-life superhero. Seeing how a single moment in life can change everything for the worst, but not make someone lose all hope in life is truly something, and this movie is definitely one of the most emotional films of the whole year. And with all of that down, let's get to what you've all been waiting for, my top 10 movies of 2024. Number 10, I Saw the TV Glow. A haunting and beautifully made horror drama from Jane Schoenbrunn. It's a commentary on so many different things, and it's hard to fully grasp all it's trying to say just from one viewing. I mean, I think you have the very obvious metaphor of what this movie is, but then there are so many metaphors within the metaphor that I just keep thinking about. It's really interesting. Truthfully, when I first walked out of the movie, I wasn't even sure how much I liked it, but the more I thought about it, and the more I sat on what it was trying to say, the more I think I just appreciated and grew the film to even love it. I was thinking about it constantly for like 2 weeks straight, so I decided to watch it a second time, and it was even better. And I've seen it a third time since then. It's just a really good movie, but albeit a movie that not everyone will like. And it's a movie that I could absolutely see some people flat out hating because of how bizarre and uncomfortable it gets to watch. But I think there's just so much to this movie, and it's the kind of film that makes you think about it and want to question what you just watched. And I just think those kinds of movies are really fascinating. This is one of the best A24 movies I've seen in a long time. That's the studio who made this movie. And I just think it holds up super well in the sense that you really just want to keep thinking about it and want to watch it again just to see if you can kind of uncover anything new about it. Number 9, Transformers 1. The trailer for this movie did such an injustice to it. I mean, I'm such a big Transformers fan. I loved the characters and toys as a kid. I really like this franchise, and some of my most fond memories growing up include watching the Michael Bay films and Bumblebee when they came out. I mean, let's be honest, the Michael Bay movies aren't anything special, but they are very nostalgic to me, and Bumblebee is a really fun movie. But when the teaser for this movie, this animated film that kind of did like a new origin story came out, I initially thought it just looked like a lower tier family movie. And I just wasn't that interested in seeing it, but I wanted to take it to see a 2-month early screening of this movie and went in very skeptical, but also kind of optimistic because studios don't show a movie that early unless they're confident in it. So I was like, I don't really have much, I don't have expectations, but maybe it'll be good. And when I went, my reaction was like, oh my god, this movie is so awesome. It starts off kind of underwhelming, and I was like a bit nervous it would be like that for the whole movie. But as it kept going, it kept getting better and better and better until it like culminated in this amazing climax. And I got such a cool Transformers origin story that's carried by this truly tragic story between Optimus Prime and Megatron. It's really riveting. I mean, I love this movie. I've seen it like 4 or 5 times now. It's so good. It gets better every time too. Like even the parts in the beginning I wasn't so crazy about the first time kind of gets better each time I watched it because you know kind of where it's going and what it's leading to, and you can kind of see where things were building on each other. It's a movie that has great action sequences, compelling drama, and some fun humor too. Literally though, the third act is one of the best finales I've seen in a movie in such a long time. I love what this movie does with the characters, and I'm really bummed not more people checked it out because if I don't get a sequel to this movie, I'm gonna riot. I'm just saying, like, I need a sequel to this movie. But even so, I think Transformers 1 holds up so well on its own, and I love it. Number 8, Dee Dee. I remember seeing this movie back in January of last year when it was shown during Sundance, and from that day, I literally said I'd be shocked if the movie wasn't still on my mind at the end of the year, because it's that good. Coming-of-age stories can be very hit or miss, let's say. And while this one isn't necessarily doing anything crazy different from the average coming-of-age story, it's just a really well-made movie that treats these teenagers as actual teenagers. The lead character, Chris, is sometimes hard to root for, but you also really feel for him throughout the film and want him to succeed. You want him to make friends, and you want him to just kind of get where he wants to go in life. And he's just a troubled teenager making mistakes and not sure where he fits anymore. The whole family dynamic in this film is great. The way he interacts with his mom and sister and grandma. It's all really well done and feels very realistic, but also has this very great stylistic touch from director Sean Wang, who finds these great smaller moments in what makes Dee Dee so enjoyable to watch. I mean, I think Sean Wang even said this movie's kind of like sort of based on his life, and you can kind of see that throughout the whole thing. It's like his apology for being so mean as a teenager, and I think it just works so well. I really enjoyed this movie. The music choices are great, it's very funny, and it packs a punch when it needs to. It really gets going and towards the end, especially when you really start feeling it all. And frankly, it's just a movie I didn't want to end. Number 7, I'm Still Here. This is without a doubt the saddest and heaviest movie of the year that I've seen. It's really sad. Like, this movie tells the story of a happy family living in Rio. go through a devastating turn of events that tears the family apart from the inside. Fernanda Torres is exceptional and definitely deserves her Best Actress nomination. Honestly, I thought there was a shot she actually could win, but unfortunately she didn't. But even so, I mean, Mikey Madison was great too, but Fernanda Torres is so good here. And I'm Still Here is really this year's Anatomy of a Fall, where the audience is essentially just a fly on the wall watching these horrible events take place, and you just want to stand in the corner quietly when it's all over. Like, when the movie ended, I was simply speechless and had to process it all for a while. It's just a really sad story, but a very important one that I think is definitely worth seeing for that reason. I mean, I think it's worth knowing this story about like what these people had to go through. And to make the movie even sadder, it's apparently a true story too. So that makes it again even more important, like why you should see this movie. But such a well-made film. It really like immerses you in the whole thing, and you feel it all in this one. I mean, it's really sad, but it's also very rewarding and definitely worthy of a spot on this list. Number 6, The Wild Robot. DreamWorks Animation can be very hit or miss when it comes to their movies, but The Wild Robot is one of their best hits ever. This is a deeply emotional and human film, ironically about a robot, but it's really a tale of a robot becoming a mother and learning to love. Lupita Nyong'o is great. She's one of the best actors working today, in my opinion, and she finds so many ways to bring expression to a character who frankly doesn't emote very much, but you really feel everything coming out of her character. And the animation here is terrific. The style lends itself so nicely to the film. There are so many other amazing qualities to it, like the breathtaking score, beautiful colors, clever writing, and lovable characters. There's so many things I could just talk about with this movie that I love. Definitely one of the most emotional films of the year, and it's also one of the most rewatchable movies of the year too. I mean, I've seen it a few times. It just really hits every time I watch it. And again, definitely one of the most heartfelt too. I mean, really a great movie that kind of touches DreamWorks highs of like How to Train Your Dragon, and it's just such a great movie, and I think anyone who watches it will enjoy it. Number 5, His Three Daughters. If you want an emotional movie, this one is for you. There's a lot of talking in this movie, and in that sense, it almost feels like a play. But the performances and writing are just so good that I really liked getting to spend time with these characters, and that's where the real meat of this movie is just really like observing these three sisters and just kind of seeing them go through life in this way. Elizabeth Olsen, Natasha Lyonne, and Carrie Coon play these three estranged sisters who reunite when their father is dying. And it's a very simple movie. It's very basic in the way that it's told, but I just think it's so well told that it works on every level. It's a great example of a movie that continuously plays with your expectations and makes you rethink everything you saw before differently, especially towards the end, not to mention, the last 20 minutes or so, which are some of the most tear-jerking cinema of 2024, but it's so well done. I mean, that last monologue in the movie is truly great. Like, it's one of the most memorable scenes of 2024 to me, and really just, again, the last 20 minutes, it's like, hits me like a train every time. It's really good. It's really a shame this movie got practically no awards recognition because there's a lot of great stuff here. Definitely one of the most underrated and overlooked films of the year for sure. And I mean, I watched this movie on a plane, and that's when I first saw it, and it like that's just to tell you how good it was, because usually I feel like you watch something on a plane, it doesn't like really land as hard. I mean, for me, I was like I was practically crying at the end of the flight. I was like, oh my god, this movie's great, so good. Number 4, Anora. This Best Picture winner is well deserved. Anora is a movie that I could go on about for hours. What makes it fun, what makes it sad, comedic, etc. Mikey Madison is terrific, as I said before. I mean, she definitely deserved the Academy Award for Best Actress. She is great here. And if you say her performance was flat in the movie, you're crazy. I mean, she has so much nuance underneath all the yelling that's going on, all the swearing, which is partly what I love so much about her character is that, and that's kind of the whole thing with the movie too, is that the whole movie is just kind of like yelling and screaming and talking loudly, but there's so much small stuff that goes on beneath everything else that if you can kind of catch it, you really understand this movie in a different way. And that's kind of how I saw it. I mean, I love what's going on beneath the surface of this film. There's so much to talk about, so much to think about. Sean Baker writes, directs, and edits this film so greatly, and I think he nails all the big tonal and story shifts. He really does a great job. This movie was such a pleasant surprise where I never knew where things were headed, but I had such a good time throughout. It's really like a roller coaster of a movie where, you're not really sure where anything's headed, but you're just like, I'm down for wherever you want to take me next. And it's so much fun. It's a really good story. It's laugh out loud funny, very entertaining, and just tells one heck of a story. I mean, I don't think any movie last year was like Nora. It's a very distinct beast of its own, and that's what makes it so special. Number 3, Furiosa, a Mad Max saga. After Mad Max Fury Road, I wasn't sure how director George Miller could even come close to matching that movie in the future. I mean, I think that movie's a masterpiece, and it deserved all the Oscar nominations it got, all the wins it got. Frankly, probably deserved even more than it got, but it's an instant classic that will probably be studied for years to come on how to do an action movie right. Every time I've watched Mad Max Fury Road, it's so intense, and that's crazy. You normally watch a movie on repeat viewings, and it just, the action maybe isn't quite as exciting as it was the first time. That's not the case with Fury Road. I mean, every time you watch it, it's like an adrenaline rush. And with Furiosa, George Miller chose to not match Fury Road. Instead, he did something very different, but perhaps just as interesting. Whereas Fury Road was a fast-paced action spectacle, Furiosa is a slow-burn action drama that tells more of a traditional revenge story in the Mad Max world. It's not quite the insane adrenaline rush Fury Road was, but it's a different thing entirely that just kind of tells a more sophisticated story. It's more about the story than the action, whereas Fury Road was just more, I think, action than story. Anya Taylor-Joy is excellent in this film, taking over for Charlize Theron, who plays an older version of Furiosa in Fury Road. And even though she barely says anything throughout the movie, I don't even know if she has more than 20 or 30 lines in the film, she shows so much emotion and expression that you know exactly what she's trying to say, even just from her eyes and her facial expressions. The action in this film is also so epic in scale and is as manic as you'd hope when it's there. Not a ton of action, I mean, again, not nearly as much as Fury Road, but the action here does deliver when it comes. Chris Hemsworth is also fantastic in this movie. I've never seen him so good, and he frankly deserved a Best Supporting Actor nomination. Some of his monologues in this film are just wow. I've seen this movie 5 times and haven't grown tired of it. Despite being around 2 hours and 40 minutes, everything is just that good about it. It's basically perfect. It's insanely rewatchable and actually gets better with every viewing. I mean, I didn't adore this movie the first time I watched it. I really liked it, but I didn't adore it. I literally viewing 2 even better, viewing 3 even better, viewing 4 even better, 5, oh my god, it's peak. It's such a good movie. I love it. Number 2, Dune Part 2. Very fitting. I love the first Dune by Denis Villeneuve. That movie was such a technical marvel that blew me away. It has some of the best visual effects, music, cinematography, production design, costume design, and sound design I've ever seen. And this second part somehow finds a way to one-up the first in practically every way. It's criminal that Part 2 didn't get more Oscar recognition, particularly for Denis Villeneuve, because he proves that he's one of the best visionary filmmakers alive. What he does with this movie is, frankly, miraculous, and I don't think he's getting enough credit for it. I mean, I've heard the Dune book is, practically unadaptable. That's kind of what everyone kept saying. I mean, that's why there was a David Lynch Dune movie that came out many years ago that was really bad, frankly, and just didn't do a good job of conveying this story. But what Denis Villeneuve does here is just amazing. I mean, the visuals are breathtaking. The storytelling is perfect. It's such a good movie, and I just think it's all done so well. The action is intense and riveting. The romance between Paul and Chani is at the center of it all. It's a perfect film. It really is. I just don't know how this didn't get more Oscar recognition. I mean, it got a Best Picture nomination. I still don't think that's enough. I mean, it really is a great film. If it ever gets re-released in theaters, I'm going immediately because this is like one of the best cinematic experiences I've had in a theater in a long time. It's just breathtaking. The whole thing is stunning. And after that, you're probably wondering, how on earth is there a movie I liked even more than Dune? Well, there is, and that movie is my number one movie of the year, Better Man. What can I say about Better Man? It's the movie that made me feel the most in 2024 and feel every emotion. It's funny, it's sad, it's joyful. It has some of the most euphoric and exhilarating scenes of the year that got my adrenaline pumping. There are scenes that made me feel on top of the world along with Robbie Williams as an artist, and there are these scenes where reality comes crashing down on him, but there's some of the most heartbreaking, sad scenes you can imagine. But then it'll do something beautiful where it all wraps up in this emotional climax that brings out all these bittersweet feelings that got me on the verge of tears every time I watched it. The musical numbers are so smartly woven into the story and actually have something to say. Like, they aren't just there to be music, they're there to actually tell a story like a good musical does. The choreography is fantastic, some of the best I've seen in years. And then you have all these incredible visual effects to top it all off. I mean, making Robbie Williams into a CGI ape may sound questionable at first, but I assure you that it's not a gimmick and might actually be what ties the whole thing together. And you have all these really awesome like backgrounds in the musical numbers that also use visual effects to help tell the story. It's really beautiful. And as someone who wasn't huge on Michael Gracey's last film, The Greatest Showman, which I know a lot of people love, that's one of my most, big hot takes. This should have gotten tons of award buzz that it didn't get, and I firmly believe it deserves. Similar to Transformers 1, I can't believe people let this movie flop so hard at the box office. Like, I didn't know who Robbie Williams was going into this movie, but now I'll never forget. Seriously, go see this movie. It's currently streaming on Paramount Plus, or you can go rent it somewhere. You won't regret it. It's probably my favorite musical biopic ever, and I just really have no notes about this movie. It is perfect and a really great film that explores so many themes and just, I don't know, just kind of captures everything I love in movies. Like, all these movies in my top 10 are great films, and they all kind of capture something I love about going to the movies and watching movies, what makes me love them. But Better Man is just kind of the greatest kind of capsulation of it all, and just kind of how you can tell a story visually that's so impressive and emotional and connects so much with you as a person, and just, it's so good. I really can't recommend this movie enough. Please go see it. And that about does it for this episode. If you want to follow my reviews, you can find me on Letterboxd at MovieKing1224. You can also listen to this podcast on your favorite apps such as Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Music. If you have any comments or feedback, I would love to hear it and improve the show. And of course, if you've enjoyed this episode, please consider liking, subscribing, and hitting the notification bell to hear more like it. I appreciate you all so much for listening, and I'll talk to you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.